Hello aqua friends, welcome to my channel. My name's Nicole and I have this really cool watercolor collage of sorts for you today. It's kind of the part 2 of the other koi fish that I did last week. I was just getting different ideas about how I could maybe redo this painting that I did, and I started off in the same manner with this circular movement to the water. And instead of taping my paper down, I actually soaked it. So when you soak your paper in the water in the sink, it's going to give you a lot more time to put down colors. Your paper will stay wet longer. It will stick to the board and you won't need any tape for your first layer. So that's what I'm doing now. If you guys are wondering how it's staying on there so well and it's stuck to the board, that's because the water on both sides of the paper will keep it in place. And so I'm building up my colors. I'm using the same blues. I'll have all the supplies that I used in the description of the video, but I'm starting from the lightest colors and going darker. So once I'm happy with the amount of pigment I have on here, I am just going to let that whole thing dry. Now, once I do my second layer, just wanted to let you know that you do have to tape it down at that point because your paper's completely dry. I thought of this really neat idea of using some cling wrap to get all sorts of line textures. And so I'm making my paper sloppy wet. And I'm going to bring in some very dark indigo blue here, along with some burnt sienna. And when you mix these two together, or when they mix on the paper, they will make a gray all on their own. So you have blues, you have a rich brownish red, and grays. And so I'm just making a mess. I'm just playing around to see if it's going to turn out the way I thought. So look at how saturated this is, guys. Just completely full of water. So now I'm just putting down a couple of pieces of cling wrap. I'm sure you guys have seen this before, and if you haven't, if this is your first time seeing this, the cling wrap is going to make all these weird impressions, and you're going to let your paper dry completely. Now that I have this really cool texture and some different colors going on here, I'm going to use some of the same lines from my cling wrap, and I'm going to make some stones. So I'm just using the same neutral colors, and really all I want to do in this layer is make my shapes. So I am following some lines of the creases made by the cling wrap. I'm going against some of the lines, and so that I have some striations going down the rocks that we will later add a little bit more detail. Now, keeping in mind that this is the background layer, I'm not going to go too crazy with the detail, but if this was a painting just on river rocks, you guys could go absolutely crazy with details and really building up your colors, making your darks really dark and making those rocks pop. But like I said, I have to keep in mind it is the background. I want my koi fish to be the main attraction. And yes, this is sped up quite a bit. This is a tedious process and a time-consuming process. You want to have some big rocks and some medium, some small pebbles, and just kind of make it really plausible, and just having, you know, this area of all these beautiful river rocks. So I'm varying my shapes. And notice once I do the outline, I go around with some clean water, and it just kind of gives it that faded out look so that it almost looks like I'm doing negative painting in a way. Well, that's exactly what I'm doing. And you're fading that out so that it's darker and it has like a shadow look around it. All right, so you're going to keep going until you're happy with the amount of rocks that you have. And by the time I finish doing that, I could pick a corner. It's pretty much dry, and then I'm going to build up these rocks a little bit. Like I said, I don't want them to be the center of attention, but I'm going to give them a little bit more shape. Since I had that burnt sienna I used, I'm adding some stripes of burnt sienna to some of the rocks using one of my script liner brushes to add more lines on the rocks and following the curvature of the stones as well. In some areas, you're going to want to darken things up where the rocks are in these little nooks and crannies. Those will be darker. So this is a lot of fun, actually, doing this. It does just take a long time, guys. I'm not going to lie. Like I said, I'm totally speeding this up because I don't want you guys getting like bored or whatever. But just wanted to, you get the gist of it, and you definitely don't want to see this in real time because I'll put you to sleep. But it is kind of neat. I really did like doing this, and I'm trying to spread out the bird sienna so that I have little splashes of that reddish color throughout the painting, so it kind of balances it out. And you still do get that movement of the first layer. It's not quite as noticeable, but there is some movement there. So I just love how that first layer still peeks through so that you get the movement of the water, but you also are looking at all these beautiful rocks. Because koi ponds often have, you know, wonderful plants in there and some rocks, and they're just so beautiful. So I hope you guys are having a good spring/summer. I'll be taking a little break after this video for a couple of weeks. My daughter is graduating and her big graduation party is at the end of the month. I have family coming in from Canada and helping me set up for this party. I also just bought a house in Florida. I have to go down there and close in between working as a nurse and also working on my art. So it's been a fun, very fun and packed summer for me. So as you see, I'm just kind of bouncing around where I see I might need another little glaze of color to darken things up, put in some more shadows. So that is it for the river rocks. And now I thought of doing the fish separately. So I traced out my fish. These fish are pretty much going to be one layer instead of what I did last week, where I did them more detailed last week and I did them in 2 layers. So I decided that I was going to do a sort of collage and actually cut these fish out and just glue them on. I used to do a lot of scrapbooking, and so I just kind of like that layering. I also used to do a lot of paper flowers, making paper flowers with crepe paper, and they're so detailed and beautiful you'd swear they're real flowers. So you can cut these fins in a way where they have so much movement, and you can curl up the edges with a scissors just like when we were kids. And I really kind of thought about this idea, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, I'm just gonna give it a go, like just try it. And that's, you explore and you try new things and see what happens. And I ended up loving it. I hope you guys love it too. So I'm using the exact same colors that I used last week. This is transparent pyrrole orange. I also used some quinacridone gold for a little bit more warmth in that under layer. While the paint is still wet, you can see I'm dabbing in the color in a stronger mixture for some texture. And then his very bright head, I've added in some scarlet red. Like I said, you guys don't have to worry too much about, painting outside of the lines, because this fish is going to get cut out. Coming in with my neutral tint in order to put in the shadows and the lines on the fins here. So with a tiny brush and dabbing in some very watery mixture of the neutral tints for the scales. So that pretty much concludes this fish. Just gonna dry them off a little bit so that I could add in the eyes. And I'm moving on to the next fish. So this next fish, he's got this peachy, really beautiful peachy undertones. And so I'm just using that same transparent pyrrole orange, just a very watery mixture. Also adding in those grays and the fins. Dabbing in the scales. Looks great when you add those textures in there. And then, of course, he's got those very darker area scales, and it's nice to do it while it's still wet because it bleeds together a little bit and it's softer. For those darker scales, you will just use a thicker consistency of that neutral tint color. And a lot of people ask me, what color did you use for neutral tint? That is the name of the color, actually. It's called neutral tint, and it's by a Holbein Watercolors. I'm not sure if Daniel Smith sells a neutral tint, but the one that I use is from Holbein. Most of the paints that I use are either Daniel Smith or Holbein, and I'm very much enjoying using Daniel Smith, I think, even more than Holbein now. So I'm sort of like transitioning over to buying more Daniel Smith watercolor paints. So here goes the cutting out. Now this has to be done very delicately, so I sped this up because I'm sure you don't want to see me cutting out fish for half an hour. No, I don't know if it took me a half hour. I don't think it took me that long. But I do like to use smaller scissors and really cut out those fins. You'll see in the next part. Right now I'm just cutting out the shape. And it doesn't look like it, but I am being very careful and going along my painting lines and drawing lines as best I could here, so that it has a really nice clean shape. So now I'm following the curve of the paintbrush, and I'm cutting tiny, tiny little serrated parts here for his fins and using my scissors to curl it up a little bit. This gives them a 3-dimension, and it just really adds to it. Plus, you know, those betta fishes that are in the water and they have these beautiful flowy, like it almost looks like hair, just like floating in the water, all gorgeous. That's the vision that I had when I was like trying to do these koi fish. And so that's why I'm cutting it so thin. And I have to be very careful you don't accidentally snip what you've already cut. So I'm taking my time and I'm really trying to get those very, very loosely, very thin, and they just go all wiry and they look so realistic, like looks like they're floating in the water type of thing. So sometimes, depending, I will flip my fish upside down so that I could get a better grip and a better direction on cutting those edges. Again, taking my scissors and curling that up a little bit. So that's one down, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with this other fish here. Now let's talk about gluing it onto your watercolor paper. You could definitely use just regular white glue. That would totally work. I just happen to have double-sided tape because I do card making, and I like basically love all crafts, guys. So I'm just using a few pieces of that. It's very strong, it's acid-free, and it works great. And so, you know, I'm going to see where I want to put the fish, just put them on there, and then you are done. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.